I always thought my life would be simple, that I'd eventually just fade away quietly in my own home after the years wore me down. But damn, nothing prepared me for the betrayal that came from the one person who should have cared the most, my own daughter-in-law, Melody. It all started when I had a stroke at 75. It hit me like a freight train, like I was just waiting for the inevitable. Eleanor, my wife, had passed 5 years earlier, taking with her the only real joy in this house on Maple Street. My kids were scattered. Verer, my son, lived across the city in Dayton with his family, and Lucille, my daughter, was as far away as Colorado. And then, on one gray morning, half of me just stopped working. The doctor said I was lucky, no brain damage, no speech problems, but the left side of my body, like a stranger's arm and leg dragging behind me, a mess. Verer offered to move in with them until I recovered. He said it was temporary. Temporary? What the hell does that even mean? It's been 3 years now, and I'm still here, still a burden in their perfect little house in Dayton. Melody, Verer's wife, a 38-year-old realtor with big dreams and no patience for the disabled, made it clear right from the start that I wasn't exactly welcome. "Mr. Farnan, you'll be comfortable in our guest wing," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No stairs, private bath, perfect for your condition." Her voice dropped when she said condition, like I was something you had to tolerate, not someone you loved. It didn't take long for me to realize she hated having me here. Everything about me seemed to irritate her. Even after 3 years, she couldn't call me Dad or Pierce without that icy edge in her voice. I was just Mr. Farnan, always the outsider in my own son's house. Every morning she'd greet me with that fake smile while she sipped on some fancy green smoothie asking if I'd slept well. And every morning I'd lie and say fine, even though her cheap mattress gave me aches all night long. The heat she cranked up in my room to make me comfortable gave me headaches, but of course I didn't matter enough for her to adjust it. She said it was for my own good, but I knew she was just covering for the fact she wanted me out of sight. And it was always the same, that empty concern. I'd ask for something as simple as a glass of water, and it was like I was asking for the moon. She'd go on about how I couldn't handle modern tech while I was secretly hacking into the smart home system Vera set up. I knew more than she thought. She had no idea I could control the lights, the locks, even the temperature in my room through my phone. She didn't just treat me like an inconvenience. She ignored me like I didn't exist. I'd be sitting there, staring out the window, trying to make sense of it all, and she'd talk right past me, never acknowledging my presence unless it was to criticize me for something small. "Mr. Farnan, please don't leave your pills out on the counter. It's not very appetizing for company." Or, "Mr. Farnan, why didn't you tell me the milk was out?" The daily jabs, little insults disguised as concern, meant to make me feel small, insignificant. Then came that day, the day I'd been waiting for, my 78th birthday. I hadn't even told Melody I was expecting anything. Hell, I didn't even expect anything, but I'd hoped, maybe, just maybe, she'd acknowledge the day. But no. As usual, she was more concerned about her business deals than anything to do with me. "Oh, you're up already?" she said, her voice as flat as a pancake. "It's your birthday today, right? Well, we've got some clients coming over tonight for a big meeting. You'll probably want to stay in your room." No happy birthday, no offer to celebrate, nothing. Just a business transaction disguised as an obligation. I tried to keep my cool. "It's my birthday, Melody," I said softly, trying to get through to her. She barely glanced up from her phone. "Oh, right, your birthday. Well, don't worry, we'll celebrate this weekend. I've already got everything planned." Everything planned? Not for me. She didn't even have the decency to ask me what I wanted. All she saw was a useless old man getting in the way of her precious career. And the worst part? The part I'll never forget? When I overheard her on the phone later that day talking to Jennifer about how much she hated having me around. "He's ruining our lives," she said, voice dripping with contempt. "I can't have a glass of wine with my friends without him crawling out of his room, complaining about his health." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was nothing but a burden to her, not even family, a nuisance. The rage burned inside me. I clenched my fists, my knuckles aching as I listened. I had given up everything for this family, sacrificed my own well-being for their comfort, and this was how I was treated. That was it. That was the moment I realized things were never going to change. They would never see me as anything but a problem to be hidden away. The only question left was how to make them see me, really see me, before it was too late. I could feel the anger seeping through my bones, but I knew I had to keep my head straight. No matter how hard it was, I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. Melody thought she had me figured out. She thought I was just some old man who couldn't defend himself. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't as weak as she believed. My birthday had come and gone without a single moment of recognition, and the final straw hit me when she had the audacity to lock me in the basement like I was some nuisance to be discarded. I couldn't believe it. She did it with such cold calculation. The whole thing was a power move, an attempt to control me. But what she didn't realize was that locking me up only ignited something inside of me. It made me feel more alive than I had in years. When she'd come down to show me some old photos, I knew something was off. But my curiosity got the better of me, and I followed her into that sterile, emotionless basement of hers. The way she led me down those stairs as if she was doing me a favor made my skin crawl. I had always known that there was something about her, something underneath the surface, but now I was sure. Melody wasn't just cold. She was manipulative, deceitful, and she didn't care about family, only herself. And the moment that door slammed shut behind me, I realized that I was in it. I banged on the door, my heart pounding in my chest, my fists slamming against the wood. "Melody, open this door right now," I shouted. But the only response was the sound of her retreating footsteps. That was it. I was locked in there on my own while she went upstairs and pretended everything was fine. I banged on the door until my knuckles were bloody. I even tried to kick the lock with my cane, but it didn't budge. I felt powerless. But then a moment of clarity hit me. I wasn't powerless. I still had a phone in my pocket, and I still had access to the world, even if she thought I didn't. I opened up the app, the one Vera had set up for the house's smart system, and I began to look around. I knew there were cameras installed in the living room, the dining room, even the backyard. And Melody didn't realize that I'd been secretly learning how to use the system. It wasn't just about controlling the lights or adjusting the thermostat. No, I had a deeper understanding now. I tapped into the camera feed and saw her, Melody, surrounded by the guests she cared so much about. It made me sick to see her smile, her fake charm lighting up the room as if she was a gracious hostess. She was talking to some well-dressed man, her body language betraying the affection she was showing him. I could see it, the way she laughed, the way she tilted her head as he spoke. They were more than just business associates. I didn't have to be a genius to see that. She was flirting, and I felt the bile rise in my throat. Then I saw something even worse. I switched to the camera in the backyard and saw them, Melody and the man. They were talking in low voices, standing close to each other. Melody was practically hanging on him, and the way they looked at each other, it was sickening. My heart sank. They kissed, passionately, and my blood ran cold. She was planning to meet him later. She was going to be with him while her husband, my son, was away at work. I had known she was capable of deceit, but this was something else. She wasn't just cheating on Vera. She was planning to tear apart the family for her own gain. And she didn't care about me at all. She just saw me as something to be hidden away. I sat there in that basement, the sound of their laughter and clinking glasses from upstairs barely audible. The truth hit me like a freight train. I had been in denial for so long. I had hoped, for Vera's sake, that things would get better, that maybe this was just a rough patch. But it wasn't. It wasn't just a rough patch. Melody wasn't just a nuisance. She was a liar, a cheat, and she was making a fool of my son. I didn't know what to do with this information. If I called Vera, would he even believe me? He had always been so blind to Melody's true nature. He always thought the best of her, and I knew that if I confronted him with this, he might dismiss it as some mistake or misunderstanding. But I couldn't let it slide, not anymore. I needed help. And as I sat there, seething with frustration, it hit me. Lucille, my daughter. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not because of some terrible fight, but because of a misunderstanding. She had stopped returning my calls, and I always assumed it was something I said. But now I realized it wasn't me. It was Melody. She had been the one interfering, keeping me and Lucille apart. I had to call her. I fumbled with my phone, my hands shaking, and finally found Lucille's number. I took a deep breath and pressed the button. It rang a few times before she answered. "Papa?" Her voice was soft, but there was something unfamiliar about it. "Lucille," I said, my voice trembling, "I need your help." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "What's wrong?" "Melody locked me in the basement. She's having a party upstairs and she doesn't want me around. She locked me up so I wouldn't ruin her evening." The words spilled out, raw and desperate. "Dad, are you serious?" Lucille's voice cracked with disbelief. "I'm serious. I'm locked in here and she's upstairs pretending everything's fine." There was a silence on the other end of the line before Lucille spoke again. But this time her voice was firm, full of anger. "I'll be there as soon as I can." "Thank you," I whispered, feeling a tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't just about Melody anymore. It was about reclaiming some sense of dignity, about getting the truth out into the open. I sat there in that basement for what felt like hours. The muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses from upstairs barely reached me, but they were enough to remind me of how little I mattered to this family. To Melody, I was just an inconvenience, an old man she could lock away to keep her perfect life intact. The minutes dragged on, each second a reminder of my helplessness. But then my phone vibrated. It was Lucille. My heart skipped a beat. "Lucille," I answered quickly, my voice shaky. "Papa, I'm almost there. I'll be there in 10 minutes, she said, her voice filled with urgency. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time that day, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't entirely alone in this. Maybe I wasn't forgotten. I sat back on the couch in the corner of the basement, staring at the door. I was still angry, furious even, but now there was something else. A quiet resolve was building inside me. Melody had made her move, thinking she could shut me up and hide me away. But she had underestimated one thing. I wasn't going to just let this slide. I wasn't some invisible old man she could ignore or lock in a basement. Minutes passed, and I kept checking my phone. I could hear the distant sounds of the party, the voices getting louder as the night wore on. Melody was so wrapped up in her perfect world, hosting her fancy guests, pretending everything was fine. But I knew the truth, and Lucille would know it too. Melody couldn't hide it from us anymore. When the footsteps finally echoed down the stairs, I looked up and saw my daughter standing at the door. She was wearing that same expression, determined, strong. The woman I'd always known. Lucille had always been my little girl, the one who saw through the cracks in everything, the one who didn't let anything slide. She reached for the key, and as soon as she unlocked the door, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I wasn't trapped anymore. Lucille was here, and things were about to change. "Daddy," she said, rushing over to me, "are you okay?" I managed a weak smile, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm fine, honey, but this isn't over. It's far from over." Lucille looked at me, her face pale with anger. "What did she do to you?" "Locked me in here," I muttered, feeling the rage return. "She thought I wouldn't notice, thought I'd stay quiet while she played her little games upstairs." "That woman," Lucille hissed under her breath. "She's gone too far. This is beyond just being cruel. She's manipulating everyone." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. "She's been playing all of us, Lucille, all of us. But I'm not going to sit back and let her get away with it anymore." Lucille nodded, her jaw set. "No, we're going to make sure she doesn't. She's messed with the wrong people." We didn't waste any more time. I pulled myself to my feet with her help, my cane in hand. But I felt stronger now. I felt like I could finally do something. As we walked back upstairs, I could hear the laughter and music coming from the living room. It was like nothing had changed for Melody. She was still playing the perfect hostess while I was left to rot in the basement, but I wasn't going to let her hide it anymore. We walked into the living room and everything stopped. The chatter died down, the music faltered. All eyes were on us. Melody was standing near the center of the room, glass in hand, her expression frozen. "Mr. Farnan," she said in that fake sweet voice of hers. "Lucille, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you." I could see the fear in her eyes. It was clear now. She knew. She knew everything. She couldn't hide it anymore. Lucille stepped forward, her voice cold. "Is it true, Melody? You locked him in the basement? On his birthday?" Melody froze. Her face drained of color, and the glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. The sound of it was almost deafening in the silence that followed. I didn't wait for her to respond. She locked me in there, said it was for my own good, that the door was jammed, that I could just rest while she had her little meeting. But it wasn't an accident, was it, Melody? You did it on purpose. The room shifted uncomfortably. Guests whispered, their eyes darting between Melody and me. I could feel the weight of the truth bearing down on her. She tried to recover, but it was clear that her facade was crumbling. "Melody, you've been playing games with all of us," I said, my voice steady, despite the anger still bubbling inside me. "And now, it's time for the truth to come out." She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. For the first time, she didn't know what to say. Lucille stood by my side, her arms crossed, eyes sharp. She wasn't going to let Melody get away with it anymore. Then, as if the moment couldn't get more tense, the door opened, and there stood Verrer. He looked disheveled, tired, his eyes red from whatever work crisis he'd been dealing with. He froze when he saw us. "Lucille?" he asked, surprise in his voice. "Verrer," Lucille said coolly, "we need to talk." Verrer's gaze shifted from Lucille to me, then back to Melody. His confusion was clear. He had no idea what was going on, but the tense air in the room made it impossible for him to ignore any more. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice quiet, as if trying to make sense of the scene unfolding in front of him. Lucille didn't waste any time. She stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Melody. "What's happening, Verrer, is that your wife has been lying to you for years. She's been manipulating you, controlling the situation, and making everyone around her suffer." I saw Verrer's face tighten. He looked like he didn't know whether to take Lucille seriously or just dismiss her as being emotional. But this was different. Lucille wasn't angry for the sake of it. She was speaking the truth. "She locked me in the basement, Verrer," I said quietly, watching his face closely for any reaction. "On my birthday. Told me it was for my own good, like I was some inconvenience. She did it because she didn't want me interfering with her precious business meeting." His face went pale, and for the first time that night I saw real emotion flicker in his eyes. The realization hit him, but it didn't seem to sink in completely. Melody, who had remained silent through the exchange, took a step forward. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice trembling, but her usual composure cracked. "Dad misunderstood. I didn't lock him in. It was an accident. The door must have jammed. I was just trying to make sure he was comfortable." Her words felt hollow, like a last-ditch attempt to cover up her lies. I couldn't stand hearing them anymore. I wasn't going to let her twist the truth. "No," I said firmly. "You locked me in. You planned this. You knew exactly what you were doing, and I won't let you hide it anymore." There was a beat of silence. Melody's lips quivered as if she were going to argue, but instead she closed her mouth and took a shaky breath. I could see the anger creeping into her eyes, but this time she was on the defensive, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw her vulnerable. It was a small victory, but it was something. Vera stood there, frozen, still processing everything. "Dad, I don't know what to say," he murmured, shaking his head. "I didn't realize things had gotten this bad. I didn't know she was treating you like this." Lucille's voice was sharp. "You didn't know, Vera. How could you not? You were so busy with work you didn't even notice your own father being locked away in a basement on his birthday." I could feel the tension mounting. Vera's face was a mixture of confusion and guilt, but it wasn't enough. He needed to wake up. He needed to see his wife for who she really was. "I trusted her," Vera finally said, his voice soft, almost regretful. "I thought she had my best interests at heart. I never thought she'd do something like this." Melody tried to step in, but Lucille held up a hand, stopping her. "Save it, Melody," Lucille snapped. "You've done enough. Your lies are exposed. Your manipulation isn't going to work anymore." Vera's shoulders slumped. I could tell he was torn. His wife, the woman he'd spent years with, was someone he had always believed was by his side. But now it was clear that she had been playing him, and that realization was tearing him apart. I watched as he struggled to process everything. I can't believe this. I don't know what to think anymore." Lucille's voice softened, but it still carried weight. "It's time to stop turning a blind eye, Vera. Your wife hasn't just hurt your father. She's been lying to you for years. It's time to wake up." I never wanted it to be like this," Vera said, looking down at the floor. "I just didn't see it. I didn't want to believe it." "You didn't want to believe it, but the signs were there, Vera," I said, my voice steady now. "All those times she'd disregard me, treat me like I was invisible. I wasn't blind. I saw it. But I wasn't going to speak up until now. It's time you saw it, too." The room was quiet for a moment, the weight of the truth settling in. Melody stood still, her hands clenched at her sides as if she were ready to lash out at anyone who dared to challenge her. But she couldn't hide any more. The truth was out, and it had left her defenseless. Vera's voice finally broke the silence. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice raw with emotion. "How do I fix this?" "You can start by making things right," Lucille said firmly, "by not letting her manipulate you anymore, by choosing what's right for your family, not for her." For a moment Vera didn't respond. He just stood there, trying to make sense of everything. But then finally he looked up. His gaze was steady now, a newfound resolve in his eyes. "I'm done, Melody," he said quietly. "I can't keep living in a lie. I'm done protecting you." The room seemed to freeze as those words hung in the air. Melody's eyes widened in shock, disbelief flashing across her face. "Vera," she began, but he cut her off. "No. You've made your choices, and I'm making mine now. It's over." Melody's face twisted into a mask of rage. "You can't do this," she spat. "You're throwing everything away for them?" "For the truth," Vera said, his voice unwavering. "For what's right." The finality of it hit everyone in the room. Melody's eyes narrowed, and I saw something in them, resentment, but also fear. She had just lost the hold she had on Vera, and she knew it. There was nothing she could do to stop it. The silence in the room was deafening. Melody stood frozen, her face flushed with anger, while Vera looked like a man who had just woken up from a nightmare. He couldn't even bring himself to look at her, and that was something I hadn't seen before. The man who had always been so blind to her manipulations now stood before her, stripped of the illusions she had wrapped around him for so long. "Vera, don't do this," Melody finally said, her voice trembling but laced with venom. "You're letting them win. You're choosing your father over me, over everything we've built together." "Built together?" Vera's voice was low, but it carried the weight of years of frustration. "No, Melody, you built it. You built all of it on lies, manipulation, and deceit. And I was too blind to see it until now." Her face contorted in disbelief. She couldn't comprehend that her grip on him was slipping. "You're making a mistake, Vera," she spat, her voice shaking with rage. "You're letting them tear us apart." Lucille stepped forward, her expression unwavering. "No, Melody, you tore us apart long before this. You just never thought anyone would see it." Melody's eyes flickered with a mix of panic and defiance. She was cornered, and she knew it. "You're all turning on me," she said, her voice cracking. "I did everything for this family, and now you're throwing me away like trash?" "No, Melody," Vera said, his voice steady. You did everything for yourself. You never cared about this family, not really. Not about me, not about my father. You only cared about what you could get from us." It was like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The realization was painful, but it also seemed to clear the fog from his mind. He wasn't the man he was a moment ago. He wasn't the man who would sit idly by while his wife destroyed everything around them. "Vera, please," Melody pleaded, her voice desperate now. "I love you. I've always loved you." Her words didn't have the same effect they once would have. Vera had heard them so many times before, but now they felt empty, hollow, a lie. "I can't do this anymore," he said softly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I can't pretend I don't see who you really are." I watched the scene unfold, a mixture of pride and sadness filling my chest. Vera had finally seen the truth, but it had taken too long. Too much damage had already been done. Melody's lips trembled, and for a split second I almost felt sorry for her. But then she opened her mouth again, and that pity evaporated. "You're making a huge mistake, Vera. You'll regret this." "I won't," Vera said with certainty. "I'm done. And so are you, Melody." There was no turning back now. Melody's face twisted into a mask of rage and defeat. She knew her marriage was over. She knew everything she had fought to keep was crumbling in front of her. But there was one thing left for her to hold on to: control. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper, but venomous all the same. "You can't just walk away from me. You think you can replace me with this? With this?" She gestured to Lucille and me. I could feel the tension building as she reached for something, anything to hold on to. But Vera was resolute. He wasn't going to let her drag him down with her anymore. "I don't need you," Vera said, his voice cold, final. "You're not the person I thought you were, and I'm done trying to fix this." Melody stood there for a moment, staring at him, the storm of emotions flickering across her face. But when she spoke again, her voice was laced with a deep, bitter anger. "I never wanted to be a part of this family," she said, her eyes narrowing. "You've always held me back. You've always been in the way of what I wanted. And now you're choosing your father over me, over everything." "Everything?" Vera laughed bitterly. "You never cared about anything other than yourself. You made it all about you, Melody. It's always been about what you wanted, what you needed, and how you could use people to get it, and I let you. But not anymore." She opened her mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. There was nothing left to say. The man she had spent years manipulating had finally seen through her lies, and there was no coming back from that. "Get out, Melody," Vera said firmly. "I don't want to see you again." For a moment she didn't move, her expression one of shock, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. But then, with a sharp, angry breath, she turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house, final. The silence that followed was almost suffocating. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving us all standing there, processing what had just happened. Vera ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. "I didn't know," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine. "I didn't know how bad it had gotten. I should have seen it. I should have done something." "It's not your fault, son," I said, my voice softer than I had intended. "You weren't the only one fooled. We all were." Lucille stepped closer to her brother, her eyes softening. "But you saw it now. That's what matters." Vera nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "Yeah, I guess it is." The sound of the door slamming behind Melody echoed through the house, leaving a thick silence in its wake. No one said anything for a while. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving us standing in a kind of stunned quiet. Even the hum of the house, the sound of the refrigerator, the air conditioning, seemed muted, as though the walls themselves were processing everything that had just happened. I watched my son, standing there with his shoulders slumped, his eyes distant. I could see the weight of it all on him, the burden of the years he had spent blind to the truth. And yet there was something different in him now, something stronger. He wasn't the man he used to be. I saw it in his posture, in the way he held his head high for the first time in a long while. "Are you okay?" Lucille asked softly, her voice breaking the stillness. She had always been the one to check on me, to make sure I was fine, but now she was doing the same for Vera. I could see the bond between them, the quiet support that passed between brother and sister without a word. Vera nodded slowly, but I could tell he wasn't okay. Not really. "I don't know," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's like everything I thought was real just collapsed. Everything I knew, every belief I had was a lie." I could feel the pain in his voice, the weight of betrayal. It wasn't just that his wife had deceived him. It was the fact that for years he had been living a lie. It was a crushing realization, and I could see how deeply it was cutting into him. "I didn't want to see it," he continued, his voice almost breaking. "I didn't want to believe she could do something like this. But she's not who I thought she was. I thought I knew her. I thought she loved me. But—" "You were blinded by love, Vera," I said, my voice firm. "But I felt for him. You trusted her, and she took advantage of that. But that's over now. You can't go back. But you can move forward." He nodded. Though it was clear the path forward wasn't something he could just step on too easily. His whole world had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. Lucille stepped forward, gently placing a hand on his arm. "We're here for you, Vera. No matter what. You're not alone in this." I saw the gratitude in his eyes as he looked at her. She was right. He wasn't alone anymore. He had us. He had me. For a moment there was a long pause. The house felt different now, without Melody's presence, without her manipulations clouding the air. It felt lighter. It was strange to realize how much space one person could take up in a house. She had been a force in this home, but now, with her gone, it was like the air had cleared. It wasn't that everything was fixed or resolved. It wasn't. But it was the first step toward freedom, the first real chance at healing. Vera finally looked at me, his face filled with regret, but also something else, something like determination. "Dad," he said quietly, "I know I haven't been the son you needed me to be. I've been so wrapped up in my own life, in my work, in trying to keep everything together, and I let her control everything." I could see the guilt in his eyes, and I could feel it too. The years of silence, the years of pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. But I also knew that wasn't entirely his fault. Melody had been good at making him believe she was the right choice, the one who had it all figured out. But she hadn't. She'd just been good at manipulation. "You did the best you could, son," I said, my voice steady. "You weren't the only one fooled. You didn't know, but now you do. And that's all that matters." Lucille stepped closer to me, giving me that soft smile she always gave when she wanted me to know I was heard. "We've got this, Dad. We're going to get through it together. We don't have to carry the weight of this anymore." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride at how strong she had become. Lucille was right. We had each other now. And while there were still a lot of things to work through, so many emotions, so much healing to be done, at least now we weren't carrying the burden of Melody's lies. We had each other, and that was more than enough. "I just don't know what to do now," Vera said, his voice still uncertain. "I don't know where to go from here." I understood what he was feeling. There was so much uncertainty, so much brokenness to mend. But the first step, the one we were taking right now, was the hardest, facing the truth. After that, everything else would fall into place, slowly but surely. "You take it one day at a time," I said, my voice firm. But there was compassion in it, too. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. You've got time, and we're here with you, every step of the way." Lucille nodded, her eyes soft but determined. "We're a family, Vera. No matter what happens with Melody, we have each other." For the first time that night, Vera smiled. It was small, but it was real. And that was all I needed to see. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But we were on it together, and that meant everything. The days after Melody left were like a haze, each one blending into the next as we tried to make sense of everything. There were phone calls to be made, decisions to be finalized, and most importantly, a sense of rebuilding that had to happen. But none of us were in a rush. We had all the time we needed now. The chaos had quieted, and for the first time in a long time, the house felt peaceful. Vera was still processing, still sorting through his emotions. I could see it in his eyes every time he looked at me. He was grateful, but he was also lost. He had spent so much time pretending everything was fine, pretending he didn't see the cracks, that now that the truth had come crashing down on him, he wasn't sure how to rebuild. It was like someone had handed him a pile of broken pieces and told him to put them back together, but without the instructions. I couldn't blame him. It wasn't easy to face the person you thought you knew, only to realize they had been hiding so much from you. Melody had woven a web of lies so tightly around Vera that for years he couldn't see it. And now that it was all unraveled, there was no going back. The past was gone, and he had to figure out how to move forward. Lucille, ever the pillar of strength, was there for him every step of the way. She didn't rush him, didn't push him to do anything before he was ready, but I could see the concern in her eyes, the way she was always checking in, making sure he was okay. I think deep down she wanted to protect him from the hurt, but she also knew that the only way to heal was to face it head on. We all knew that. One evening, as I sat in the living room flipping through an old photo album, I heard Vera's voice from the hallway. "Dad, I need to talk." I closed the album, my heart skipping a beat. "Of course, son. Come in." He stepped into the room, looking different somehow, tired, yes, but also more determined than I had seen him in a long time. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he started, sitting down next to me, "about how I need to rebuild, about how it's not just about fixing everything that's broken, but figuring out who I really am now. I think I've spent too many years hiding behind the lie, behind her, and now I have to find out who I am without her." I nodded, feeling a wave of pride wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when he realized he could finally stand on his own 2 feet. "You're doing the right thing," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's not easy, I know, but it's the only way forward. You've been living in someone else's shadow for so long that you forgot what it was like to be your own man." "I don't even know where to start," Vera admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I've spent so much of my life trying to make her happy, trying to fix things that were never really broken in the first place. And now I'm lost. I don't know what to do with myself." "You start by taking back control, son. You start by living for yourself, not for anyone else. For too long you've been trying to make everyone else happy. Your wife, your friends, the business, everyone except yourself. Now it's your turn, and you'll find your way. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen." Vera looked down at his hands, his fingers fidgeting as he thought it through. "It's scary, Dad, not knowing what's next, not knowing what kind of life I'm supposed to have now that everything's changed." "I know," I said, reaching out to place a hand on his shoulder. "But you don't have to have it all figured out right away. You take it one step at a time, and you don't have to do it alone. You've got us. Lucille, me. We're here. You're not starting over from scratch. You're starting from a new place with a new understanding. That's powerful." "I don't feel powerful," Vera muttered, his voice almost a whisper. "I feel broken, like I'm starting from zero, and I'm scared." "You're not broken," I said firmly. "You're healing, and it's okay to be scared. It's okay to not have everything figured out. But don't let that fear hold you back. You're stronger than you think." Vera took a deep breath and finally met my gaze. There was a new determination in his eyes, a fire that hadn't been there before. "I'm going to do this," he said, his voice more confident now. "I'm going to find my way. I just need to figure out who I am now." "That's the first step, son," I said, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "You're going to be all right. You've already taken the hardest step. You've faced the truth." Lucille came into the room just then, a small smile on her face. "Everything okay?" she asked, glancing between us. Vera nodded, his expression softening as he looked at his sister. "Yeah, everything's fine. I think I'm finally starting to get it. It's going to take time, but I'm ready for it." Lucille smiled, walking over to give him a hug. "We'll get through it together," she said. And in that moment I realized that we really would get through it together. The road ahead was still uncertain, but at least now we weren't walking it alone. We had each other. It had been a few weeks since Melody left, and although the house felt quieter, there was still an undercurrent of tension that none of us could ignore. Vera had begun his journey of rebuilding, but the road was far from smooth. Every day, it seemed like there was a new layer to peel back, a new emotion to face. He wasn't the same person he had been before all this. It was as if he was learning to walk again, but with more scars than he realized. Lucille and I spent most of our time reassuring him, offering him support when he needed it, and space when he wanted to figure things out on his own. But there were moments when I saw that old, familiar pain creep back into his eyes. The guilt, the shame, the anger. He was angry at Melody, yes, but more than that, he was angry at himself for not seeing it sooner. One evening, I found myself sitting in the kitchen alone, sipping on my coffee, thinking about everything that had happened. The weight of it all was starting to hit me, too. Eleanor had been gone for 5 years, and I'd spent most of that time burying myself in the past, trying to preserve what we had. I thought I could hold on to it, keep things together, but I was wrong. I couldn't stop what was coming. And now, I was left picking up the pieces of a life I never thought would fall apart. My thoughts were interrupted when I heard footsteps. I looked up to see Vera standing in the doorway, looking hesitant. He had a distant look in his eyes, one I recognized all too well. "Hey, Dad," he said softly, his voice heavy with something unsaid. He stepped into the kitchen, standing across from me at the table. "Can we talk?" I nodded, setting down my coffee. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, running a hand through his hair before finally sitting down. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about everything, about what happened with Melody, what's been happening with me, with all of us. I feel lost, Dad. I don't know where to go from here." I could feel the weight of his words. It wasn't just about Melody anymore. It was about him, about his identity, his future. And that was something he had to figure out for himself. But I also knew he wasn't ready to go through it alone. "Son, I know it's hard," I said, leaning forward slightly. "You've been carrying a lot, and you've been through a hell of a lot. It's not easy to rebuild when everything feels like it's been shattered." He looked at me, his eyes filled with frustration and uncertainty. "I don't even know who I am anymore. I've spent so much time pretending to be someone I wasn't, trying to keep everyone happy, trying to make things work with her. But now that she's gone, I feel like I'm starting over, and I don't know how." "You're not starting from zero," I said firmly. "You're starting from a place of strength, whether you realize it or not. You're still here. You've still got your family. You've got people who care about you, who want to help you find your way." "But what if I don't know what I want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I'm too broken to fix?" I shook my head. "You're not broken. You're just hurt, son. And that's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. All you need to do is take one step at a time. Do the things that make you feel like you're living for yourself, not for anyone else. And I know you'll find your way." He looked at me, his expression softening. "I don't want to keep living in the past. I don't want to keep holding on to things that are gone, but it's hard to let go." "I know," I said quietly. "Letting go is one of the hardest things anyone can do. But you've already done the hardest part, facing the truth. Now, you just have to let yourself heal." There was a long pause, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. The past was always going to be there, a part of him, but it didn't have to define him, and he had to make the choice to let it go. "You're right," Vera finally said, his voice stronger now. "I can't keep holding on to the past. I've got to let go and move forward. It's just scary." It's supposed to be scary, I said with a small smile. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary, and you've got people who love you and will be there every step of the way. He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Thanks, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, son, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We're in this together. Just then Lucille walked into the kitchen, her eyes bright. She had a warmth about her that could fill a room. I could see the quiet concern in her face, but there was something else, something like hope. Maybe we were all starting to believe that things could get better after all. Everything okay in here? She asked, looking between us. Verrier smiled at her, a real smile this time, and nodded. Yeah. I think I'm finally starting to get it. It's going to be a long road, but I'm ready for it. Lucille walked over to him, giving him a quick hug. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. You're doing the right thing. The three of us stood there for a moment in the quiet of the kitchen, the weight of the world still on our shoulders, but not as heavy as before. We had each other, and that was enough to take the first step forward. A few days had passed since that conversation, and Vera seemed to be making some progress. The weight of his past was still there, but I could see that he was slowly learning to lift it, piece by piece. Every morning he would wake up, get dressed, and head out for a walk. At first I thought it was just a distraction, but I realized he was using that time to think, to breathe, without the pressure of trying to fix everything all at once. Lucille and I had noticed the small changes. His smiles were becoming more frequent, his shoulders less tense. It wasn't much, but it was something. He was starting to come back to life, one small step at a time. Still, I could see the lingering doubt in his eyes. He hadn't fully forgiven himself, and I wasn't sure when or if he ever would. But I knew that it was a journey, and that's all any of us could really ask for. That evening, as the three of us sat around the dinner table, there was a kind of ease that hadn't been there in weeks. The tension that had once filled every space in the house had faded, replaced by something almost normal. The sound of clinking silverware and quiet conversation filled the room, the kind of comfort we hadn't experienced in a long time. So, what's the next step? Lucille asked, her tone light, but I could hear the underlying question. Where do we go from here? Vera looked at her, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. He hadn't said much that evening, but now I saw him thinking, processing the question. I don't know, he said, setting the fork down. I guess I need to start focusing on what I want, not just on surviving, but on living. I nodded, a sense of pride swelling in my chest. That's the first step, son. Figuring out what makes you happy, what brings you peace. But how do I even know what makes me happy anymore? Vera asked, his voice soft, almost a whisper. I spent so many years trying to please everyone else, trying to fix things that weren't broken. I don't even know where to start. Lucille gave him a soft smile, her voice filled with warmth. Start by doing the things you enjoy. Remember those things you used to love before all of this started? The little things that made you feel good. Vera thought about it for a moment, and I could see him remembering. I used to love hiking. I used to take those long walks through the woods just to clear my head. It was one of the few things I did for myself. I smiled, glad to see the spark of something familiar in his eyes. Then do it. Go for a hike, Vera. Take the time to be by yourself. You've earned it. He smiled back, the first real smile I'd seen in a long time. Maybe I will. I think I need it. The conversation shifted after that, light and casual. We talked about the simple things, the weather, the news, plans for the weekend. But underneath the surface, I could feel the change in Vera. He was beginning to find himself again, slowly but surely. Later that night, after Lucille had gone to bed, I sat on the porch looking out at the quiet street. The evening air was cool, the stars just beginning to peek through the sky. I took a deep breath, letting the calm of the night settle over me. It had been a long time since I'd felt this sense of peace. The road ahead was still uncertain. There were things we still needed to figure out, but in that moment, I knew we were on the right path. The house was quieter now, but it wasn't empty. There was a new kind of energy here, a kind of hope that hadn't existed before. We weren't stuck in the past anymore, living in the shadow of Melody's lies. We were moving forward, one step at a time, and that was all I could ask for. I was interrupted from my thoughts by the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned to see Verrier walking out onto the porch, his hands in his pockets. "Can't sleep?" I asked, offering him a small smile. He shrugged, but I could see the weight had lifted a little. "Just needed some fresh air," he said, sitting down beside me. We both stared out at the street for a moment, the silence between us comfortable, not awkward. "I've been thinking," he said after a while, "about what you said about living for myself. It's harder than I thought. But I'm trying, Dad. I'm really trying." I nodded, proud of him. That's all anyone can do. You don't have to have it all figured out right away. Just take it one day at a time. "I'm trying," he repeated, his voice softer now. "And I'm grateful. For you, for Lucille, for everything." I smiled, my heart swelling. "You don't have to thank me. We're family, Vera, and family doesn't let each other go through this alone." He was quiet for a moment, and then he turned to me, his eyes filled with something that felt almost like a quiet resolution. "I know. I'm starting to understand that." And in that moment I knew that we were getting there, that healing was happening, even if it was slow. We weren't the same people we had been before, but maybe that was okay. We were learning to live again, learning to forgive, and, most importantly, learning to move forward. The next few weeks felt like a gradual shift. Verrier was starting to find his rhythm again, even if it was a slow process. He started taking long walks in the mornings like he used to, and I noticed he was coming back a little more relaxed, a little more at peace. Lucille and I encouraged him, but we didn't push him. He was figuring things out on his own time, and that was all we could ask for. One Saturday morning he came into the kitchen with a smile on his face, something I hadn't seen in a while. "I signed up for a hike next weekend," he said, his eyes bright. "The kind of hike I used to take, just me and the trail." I felt a lump form in my throat. I was proud of him, more than he could know. He was taking that step, the one I had been hoping for, the one that would help him heal. "That's great, son," I said, my voice steady but filled with pride. "You'll feel good getting out there, getting some fresh air, clearing your head." "I think so," he replied, his tone lighter than it had been in a long time. "I'm ready for it." Lucille was in the living room, and when she heard us talking about it, she came in with a smile. "That's awesome, Vera. I'm so glad you're doing this." He nodded, his smile widening. "Yeah, it feels like it's time." The atmosphere in the house had changed. It was quieter, yes, but the air felt clearer somehow. The tension that had once filled every corner of the house had faded, replaced by a sort of tentative peace. We were still working through things. There was still a long road ahead, but I could feel it. The worst was over. Later that week, I took a walk of my own. I didn't have a trail to follow like Vera did, but there was something calming about getting outside, about stretching my legs and feeling the sun on my face. The neighborhood was quiet, and as I walked down the familiar streets, I found myself thinking about the past, about Eleanor, about our life together. It had been 5 years since she passed, and in some ways I was still adjusting. But as I walked, I realized something. I hadn't been living in the present. I had been holding on to the past for too long, thinking that somehow that was all I had left. It was time to let go. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was time. When I returned home, Vera was sitting at the kitchen table, his backpack packed for his hike next weekend. He looked up when I entered, his expression curious. "Where'd you go?" "Just took a walk," I said, sitting down across from him. "Needed to clear my head." He raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so. You know, I've spent so much time looking back, holding on to memories of the past, but I realized today it's time to move forward. Not just for you, but for me, too." Vera studied me for a moment as though processing what I'd said. "It's hard, though, isn't it?" he asked quietly. "Letting go of everything." "It is," I agreed. But sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward. It's about embracing the future, not just holding on to what's already gone. He nodded slowly, his gaze softening. I get that. I'm still figuring it out, but I get it. I smiled at him, proud of how far he had come. You're doing great, son. You're going to be okay. That evening, we sat around the table, just the three of us. The conversation was light, but there was an underlying sense of togetherness that hadn't been there before. We were moving forward, slowly but surely, finding our way through the rubble that had once been our lives. We weren't fixed, but we were healing. The next weekend, Vera went on his hike. He'd been planning it for days, packing and preparing, making sure he was ready. Lucille and I both wished him well when he left, telling him to enjoy the peace and quiet. When he returned later that afternoon, he looked different, lighter somehow. He had a calm about him that I hadn't seen in a long time. How was it? I asked, looking up from my chair. Good, he said, setting his backpack down. It was exactly what I needed. Just me and the trail, no distractions. I could think. I could breathe. It felt good, Dad. I could hear the relief in his voice, and it made my heart swell with pride. I'm glad, I said, my voice steady but filled with warmth. Sometimes you just need to get away from everything and find yourself again. I think I did, he replied, his smile genuine. It wasn't just the hike, though. It was being away, being on my own, and just letting myself think. I realized that I don't need to rush. I don't have to fix everything right away. It's all going to take time. That's the truth, I said, but you're on the right path. Vera sat down beside me, his expression thoughtful. Thanks for always being there, Dad. For not giving up on me. I don't know if I'd be getting through this without you. You don't have to thank me, son, I said, my voice full of emotion. We're family. That's what we do. We don't give up on each other. Lucille walked into the room just then, smiling at the two of us. Looks like someone found peace today, she teased. Vera chuckled, his eyes light. Yeah, I think I did. The three of us sat there for a while, just talking, just being together. It wasn't perfect. We still had a long way to go, but in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. We had come so far, and we would continue to move forward together. The weeks following Vera's hike felt like a turning point. He wasn't exactly the same person as he had been before everything went down with Melody, but he was getting closer. Each day, he seemed more comfortable in his own skin, more at peace with the decisions he had made and more sure of the direction he was heading in. The guilt and self-doubt that had once weighed him down so heavily weren't gone, but they had less power over him. It was clear to me now that he was finally healing, even if it was in his own way and at his own pace. Lucille and I had given him space, but we both kept an eye on him, checking in when it felt right. We didn't need to say much anymore. He knew we were there for him, always. And the silence that had once felt so heavy between us now felt like a comfortable understanding. One evening after dinner, Vera sat down with us in the living room. He seemed more animated than usual, his energy lighter, his smile genuine. It was as though he had found something that had been missing for a long time. I've been thinking, he began, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. I'm ready to make some changes. Big ones. Lucille glanced at me, her eyes filled with curiosity. What kind of changes? Vera looked between us, his face a mix of excitement and nervousness. I want to start over. I've been holding on to so many things that don't matter, and I'm ready to let them go. I want to focus on what really matters, what makes me happy. The words he spoke felt like a weight lifting, and I could see how much they meant to him. He wasn't just saying them. He meant it. This was the turning point we had all been hoping for. Vera was ready to live for himself, to move forward without the weight of the past holding him back. What kind of changes are you talking about? I asked gently, not wanting to push him but wanting to know more. He took a deep breath, his expression serious now. I think I need to step away from the business. I've been too consumed by it, trying to make everyone else happy with the success. But I don't want to live like that anymore. I want to find something that makes me feel fulfilled, something that's mine. The statement hit me like a wave, and I could see Lucille's surprise reflected in her eyes. "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to process what he was saying. "Stepping away from the business is a big move." Vera nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I've thought about it a lot. The stress, the pressure, it's been building for years. It's like I've been running a race that I never agreed to. I want to focus on something that's meaningful, not just what's expected of me. Maybe I'll go back to school, take up something I actually care about. I just want to feel like I'm living my life, not someone else's." Lucille smiled softly, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "I think that's a great idea, Vera. You've been carrying that weight for so long, it's time you did something for yourself." I leaned back in my chair, letting his words sink in. This was it, the moment when he was truly taking control of his life. It wasn't just about getting over Melody or the betrayal. It was about finding his own path, rediscovering who he was outside of the roles he had been forced into. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when he took his first real step toward living for himself. "I'm proud of you, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is the kind of change that will lead you to a better place. You've spent too long doing things for other people. It's time you did something for yourself." Vera's smile widened, and I could see the relief in his eyes. "Thanks, Dad. I know it's not going to be easy, but it feels right." Lucille nodded. "And we'll be here to support you, no matter what." For the first time in a long time, there was a sense of clarity in the room. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. Vera was choosing his own happiness over the expectations others had placed on him, and that, I knew, was the key to everything. The next few days were filled with planning and thinking. Vera began reaching out to people he trusted, talking about the possibility of stepping back from the business and finding something else to pursue. He started researching schools, looking into different career paths that had always piqued his interest, but that he had never had the time or courage to explore. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of questions and a lot of doubts, but he was doing it. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't doing it alone. Lucille and I were there for him every step of the way. We listened when he needed to talk, offered advice when he asked for it, and supported him when the fear crept back in. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. Vera was starting to rebuild his life, to create something that was truly his. And that was all any of us could have asked for. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Vera looked at me and Lucille, his eyes filled with something that had been missing for so long. Hope. "I think I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. "I'm ready to make the change. I'm ready to live for me." And just like that, the future didn't seem so scary anymore. It had been a few months since Vera made his decision to step away from the business. Things were slowly starting to settle into a new normal, one where the constant pressure of trying to meet everyone's expectations wasn't hanging over his head. He was taking more time for himself, taking up new hobbies, spending more time with Lucille and me, and, most importantly, figuring out what made him happy. That evening, as the three of us sat together after dinner, I noticed a change in him. There was a calmness to his demeanor, a contentment that hadn't been there before. He wasn't rushing through life anymore. He was living it. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," Vera said, his voice thoughtful as he leaned back in his chair. "And I think I've figured out what I want to do next." Lucille looked up from her phone, her attention fully on him. "What's that?" He looked at both of us, his eyes filled with a quiet excitement. "I want to go back to school. I've been looking into different programs, and there's this environmental science program that really caught my attention. I've always cared about the environment, but I never really took the time to learn more about it. Now I feel like it's time." I smiled, genuinely proud of him. "That sounds like an amazing idea, son. It's never too late to follow your passions." "I'm actually excited about it," he said, his eyes lighting up. "I've been researching it, and it feels like the right path. I want to do something that not only makes me feel fulfilled, but also helps the world in some way." Lucille grinned, clearly happy for him. "I love that. It sounds like you're really starting to figure things out." Vera nodded, his smile wide. "Yeah. I feel like I'm finally starting to find my purpose. I'm not doing this for anyone else. It's for me. As the night went on, the three of us talked about Vera's plans, the potential hurdles, and the excitement of starting a new chapter in his life. It was a different kind of conversation than we had ever had. It wasn't filled with worry or regret. It was filled with hope, with possibility. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Vera applied for the program he had been eyeing and began taking steps toward enrolling. He still had moments of doubt, of course, moments when the fear of starting over crept in, but each time Lucille and I were there to support him. He wasn't alone in this. One weekend we all took a trip to a nearby nature reserve, a place Vera had always loved. We hiked through the trails, talked about the future, and just enjoyed being together. It was the kind of day that felt like a breath of fresh air, the kind of day where everything just clicked into place. As we sat on a bench overlooking a vast valley, Vera turned to me. "Dad, I know I've said it before, but I really mean it this time. I'm glad you're here. I don't think I could have done this without you." I felt a lump in my throat, and I had to pause for a moment before answering. "You've done it, son. You've taken the hardest steps, and I'm proud of you, no matter what." He smiled, and for a moment I could see the weight he had been carrying slowly lifting. It wasn't gone completely, but it was lighter, more manageable. The days following that trip were filled with finalizing Vera's school application, making plans for the future, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he was on the right path. There was still work to be done, still doubts to face, but I could feel the momentum building, like he was finally starting to run at his own pace without any unnecessary weight holding him back. Lucille and I continued to support him as he navigated this new chapter. She had her own life to live, but she never hesitated to be there when he needed her, whether it was to help him study for the entrance exams or just to be a sounding board for his thoughts. The change in Vera was palpable. He was more confident, more sure of himself, and the future no longer seemed like an obstacle. It felt like an opportunity, something to be embraced rather than feared. One evening, after a long day of studying, Vera sat down at the kitchen table with us. He looked exhausted, but content, a sense of peace surrounding him. "I got the acceptance letter today," he said, his voice quiet but filled with excitement. My heart swelled with pride. "That's amazing, Vera. I'm so proud of you. This is your time." Lucille jumped up to give him a hug, her eyes bright. "I knew you could do it." Verrier looked at both of us, his eyes full of gratitude. "Thanks for everything, really. I couldn't have done this without you two." "We're always here for you," Lucille said, squeezing his shoulder. And in that moment, I knew that Vera wasn't just moving on from his past. He was embracing a future that was all his own. The journey wasn't over, but it was finally moving in the right direction. He had found his purpose, and now nothing could stop him. The days leading up to Verrier's first day of school felt like a whirlwind. We had all been busy, he with his preparations, Lucille with work, and me, well, trying to stay out of the way while also offering support. It was clear that Verrier was both excited and nervous. He was starting something new, a chapter in his life that was entirely his own. The uncertainty of it all still lingered, even with the sense of purpose he had found. But as we sat together on his last night before heading to his first class, it was hard to ignore how far he had come. I could see the weight he had been carrying for so long wasn't entirely gone, but it was lighter now. He was no longer running from his past. He was embracing his future. "I can't believe tomorrow's the day," Vera said, leaning back in his chair, his fingers drumming absent-mindedly on the table. "It feels like everything's moving so fast." Lucille smiled, clearly proud of him. "You've worked hard for this, Vera. You've earned it. It's your time now." I nodded, my voice steady but full of emotion. "You've come a long way. Don't forget that. The path you're walking now is yours to create. You're not who you were when this all started, and that's the best part." Vera sighed, his shoulders relaxing as he leaned back. "I know. It's just hard to believe sometimes. I've spent so much of my life thinking I was stuck, that there was no way out of what I was doing. But now, it's like I have a clean slate. It's terrifying and exciting all at once." "That's what change is, son," I said. It's a little bit of both, terrifying and exciting. But as long as you keep moving forward, you'll find your way." Verrier smiled at me, his eyes softening. "Thanks, Dad. I don't know if I've ever really said this, but I'm glad you're here. I couldn't have done any of this without you and Lucille." Lucille grinned, walking over to give him a quick hug. "We've always had your back. Always will." The evening stretched on, with us talking about what the next few months would look like for Verrier, discussing the challenges he might face, and just enjoying the calm before the storm. There was no pressure, no rushing. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were all on the same page, like the storm that had been brewing for years had finally passed. The next morning, Vera woke up early, as if he couldn't wait for the day to begin. He was nervous, that much was obvious, but there was also an energy in him that hadn't been there before. He dressed quickly, checking his bag for everything he needed, making sure he was prepared for whatever the first day of his new life would throw at him. Lucille and I drove him to the university, and the drive was quiet but comfortable. There was a tension in the air, of course. Vera was about to start something completely new, and I could sense that fear and excitement swirling within him. But it wasn't the same kind of tension as before. It wasn't filled with doubt or regret. It was anticipation. When we pulled up to the campus, Vera paused for a moment, looking out at the sprawling grounds. "It's bigger than I thought," he muttered under his breath. I chuckled. "That's the thing about change. It's always bigger than you expect." Lucille gave him an encouraging smile. "You've got this, Vera. You're exactly where you need to be." "I know," he said, his voice steady. It's a lot to take in." We all got out of the car, and I couldn't help but notice how different he seemed. He wasn't the same person who had walked into this house just months ago, unsure of himself, lost in his own struggles. He was standing taller now, his steps more confident. He had found something inside of himself that had been buried for far too long. "Hey," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder as we stood outside the entrance to his first class. "No matter what happens today, remember this. You've already done the hardest part. You've chosen your path. Everything else is just taking the next step." Vera looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by something else, a resolve, a determination. "Thanks, Dad. I won't forget that." With one last glance, he took a deep breath and walked into the building. Lucille and I stood there for a moment, watching him go. I could feel the weight of the moment, the significance of it. This wasn't just another day. It was the start of something new, something that was completely his own. And I knew, deep down, that he was ready. As we got back into the car, Lucille looked at me with a smile. "He's going to be fine." "I know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The drive home was quiet, but I didn't mind. I felt proud of Vera. He was facing his fears, stepping into a future he had once thought was out of reach. And I knew that no matter what happened, he was going to be okay. A few weeks had passed since Vera started his new chapter at the university. Every day, it felt like he was a little more at home with the change, a little more confident in his decision to walk away from the life he'd known. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were still moments when he would doubt himself, when the weight of the past would creep in. But those moments were fewer now, and the future didn't seem as uncertain as it once had. Lucille and I kept up with him, checking in, offering support when he needed it, but we didn't push. He was finding his way, and it was beautiful to watch him grow into someone who truly understood himself. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was living, and living with purpose. It was a Saturday afternoon when Vera came over to the house, a rare visit these days. He had been so focused on his studies that we hadn't spent much time together, but when he walked in, I could tell something was different about him. His eyes were bright, and there was a confidence in the way he moved. "Hey, Dad, Lucille," he greeted us with a grin, dropping his backpack on the couch. "Got some good news." Lucille looked up from the book she was reading, her eyes curious. "What's up?" "You look like you've won the lottery or something." Vera laughed, shaking his head. "Not quite, but close enough. I got a job offer." I raised an eyebrow. A job offer? Already? Yeah, he said, his excitement growing. I applied for a research assistant position with one of my professors. They're looking for someone to help with environmental studies projects. They liked my application and they want me to start next semester. I sat back, taking in the news. For all the progress Vera had made, I hadn't expected him to land something like this so quickly. It was a big step. He wasn't just taking classes anymore. He was diving into real-world experience. That's incredible, son, I said, my voice thick with pride. I'm proud of you. That's a huge opportunity. Lucille smiled, her eyes shining with pride. I knew you'd do great things. I'm really happy for you, Vera. He beamed at both of us, his confidence now impossible to miss. Thanks, guys. I'm excited. It's a lot of work, but I feel like it's exactly what I've been looking for. I'm actually making a difference, and it's something I care about. Yeah, I said, nodding. That's the most important part. When you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work anymore. It feels like purpose. Vera paused for a moment, his smile softening. You're right, Dad. And I never thought I'd feel this way. I used to think work was just something you had to do, something that didn't really mean anything. But this feels like it matters. I could see the shift in him. This wasn't just about a job. It was about finding fulfillment, about knowing he was on the right path. I felt a warmth spread through me as I watched him. He had come so far, and I couldn't help but be amazed by how much he had changed. Lucille gave him a playful nudge. So, when do you start? Got to make sure you're ready to tackle the world, right? Vera chuckled. Next semester. But it's still a big deal. I have to learn everything I can before then. It's kind of overwhelming, but it's a good kind of overwhelming. It's all part of the process, I said, leaning back in my chair. And you've been working toward this for a long time. Don't forget that. Vera sat down next to me, his expression thoughtful. I've been thinking about everything that's happened over the past year. It's been crazy. And I didn't know if I'd make it through, but I did. And I feel like I'm in control of my life again. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm actually living. I felt a lump form in my throat as I looked at him. I had watched him struggle, watched him fight through the pain and the confusion. But now, seeing him sitting there, a young man who had found his way, I knew that all the struggles had been worth it. You've done more than survive, Vera, I said quietly. You've thrived. And I couldn't be more proud of you. Lucille's eyes softened as she looked at him. We all are. You've come such a long way. Vera looked down at his hands for a moment, his face reflecting a quiet gratitude. I didn't think I'd get here. I didn't think I'd find something that felt right. But I have. And I owe a lot of it to you two. I smiled, reaching over to give his shoulder a gentle squeeze. You've done it, son. You've made this change. All we did was remind you who you are. There was a moment of silence, a quiet understanding passing between us. Vera had come to a place of peace, and though the journey wasn't over, it felt like he was on the right path now. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were truly a family again, and I couldn't help but feel hopeful about the future. I'm just glad I'm not doing this alone, Vera said, looking at both of us. I've got you two, and that makes all the difference. Lucille smiled, reaching over to hug him. We've always had you, and we always will. As we sat there, talking about the future, laughing, and just being together, I realized that this was the moment I had been waiting for. The storm had passed, and now there was nothing but calm ahead.